in advance, you can license any of my IP for this percentage. So this means you know in advance what the worst case situation is going to be. You can always negotiate away from that, get improved deals, but that means it's easier, it reduces the transaction costs in terms of getting access to IP. And I've mentioned most of these sort of things. So, right. Now, what else can you do? So, if these conditions, of course, become too onerous, you may find that companies don't want to do any development here. And so there are other models that you can apply, which is to just fund them directly. And we are using this in some cases where we want to control the outcome of, say, a potential drug so strongly that, in fact, we'll pay for that research to happen directly, rather than give the IP away, license it to a company where we can't control the outcome. Taking that one stage further is these things called public development partnerships. These are really rather like commercial companies. They're frequently run by managers who came from the pharmaceutical industry in the drugs area, but they get their money directly from organizations like the Trust and the Gates Foundation. And these are proving to be quite successful. So these are some of the ones developing neglected diseases. This is now quite old, this study, but it shows that in a period, 25 years, you had very, very few drugs being developed in here because of essentially market failures. There was no incentive for industry to develop. But in this brief period since 2000, I think the study was done in 2003 or 4, you got 63 in various stages of development. And at least several of these I know actually are already available. It's a combination therapy from DNDi, which is on the market for $1 a day, for example. So this kind of model where you basically have a directed PPP as opposed to licensing to a company can be very effective. But you can go even further than that, because a lot of the problem with the way that companies particularly try and distort markets is because they're trying to maximize profit. And they're trying to maximize it because they want to control the future market, they want to gain the IP so that they can then have a monopoly over sales over a long period of time, over the period of the patent. Now, if they had a different incentive to doing that work, to developing that new product, they might not behave in the same way. And so these have been push incentives where you fund things directly. An alternative is pull incentives where you give them a reward for developing something other than a marketing monopoly. So instead of saying you can make as much money as you like for 20 years because you control the patent, you can say we're going to reward you directly because you've done something that's a benefit to society. We'll create a free-for-all so anybody can manufacture that. So this is a diagram to kind of show how the difference of these things would work. So this is a classic drug now. You get a drug approved and the price is very high, because the company has no competitors, it's trying to recover its development costs. And so, of course, you have a limited number of people who are treated by this. And then the patent expires and you get generic competition, you get many more people being treated because the price drops, frequently by a huge amount, much more than you'd think from this. Some of that is because of you not only don't have competition in manufacture here, but that the actual manufacturers improve the process if you allow them to compete with each other. So this is the other model, the potential model of this pull incentive, where you get a drug approved and instead of getting a marketing monopoly, you get a prize. I mean, I'm talking a big prize here. I'm talking maybe $1 billion over 10 years. But in reward for that prize, because the drug's been approved, you allow anybody to manufacture it. And so you get generics immediately, you have a low price probably goes down because the generics become better at competing with each other, and you get wide access. This is the alternative model. Now, this isn't complete pipe fiction. There is a bill in the US Senate proposing this to turn the whole of the US market over into a prize model. And these are some of the advantages, and just to say that quite recently, White House plans an innovation prize platform. So this is not just for drugs, this is being seen as potentially a thing that can be used in many industries It's already used for some, the NASA has used this as a model for trying to incentivize development of certain things. So the advantage of the prize model is basically, because you're going to say, I'm going to give a prize for this, you can say exactly what you want. Or you can say what the criteria for the sort of things you're going to give prizes are. If you give a very narrow prize, there's a problem of working out what size of prize is. But if you have a prize fund and you divide that up according to who's done the most innovative thing this year, then the system should sort of equilibrate between people creating and people rewarding prizes. And you can read about this. There's a review that my collaborator James Love and I wrote quite recently on this. This probably I don't have time to go into, but you might worry about how can you set up a prize fund in one country when the world's a globalized market. You can actually design a treaty structure around that based on GDP rewards, and I won't go into that, but you can read a write-up on that as well in PLOS Biology a while ago. Now, there is a general world WHO context to all this. This whole business about intellectual property, innovation, public health has been going on for a long time. A series of resolutions creating first a commission, followed by an international working group, which is essentially a global negotiation, which agreed everything after 2 years except a few paragraphs basically involving financing. The most controversial part has been a financing thing, and that report's due to be discussed at the World Health Assembly in May. So there is a kind of ongoing discussion about changing things in this arena, particularly in the areas of neglected diseases. In terms of practical process, one very new thing is something called the Unitaid patent pool, of setting up an instrument where people can put patents into a pool, and then it makes it easier for people to license. So that's the kind of thing you would think of in terms of controlling translation, not just give patents away in a very restricted way to one company to work on, but to put them into a pool where anybody can license them in a standardized way and can compete to manufacture around that. And then there's this statement around equitable dissemination of medical technologies from these universities in the US, which is another quite recent thing. So I'll just acknowledge the people on the sort of open access side, a whole lot of discussions involving funders, particularly Wellcome Trust and the NIH, and also the NHS as well. And then on these things around mechanisms, particularly James Love, Director of Knowledge Ecology International, and then people at various other NGOs that have taken an interest in something in the middle ground, not just demanding cheap drugs, but recognizing you've got to manage both sides. You've got to manage sustaining innovation if you want to have, if you can think about improving access, but you've got to manage to sustain innovation at the same time. Okay, thank you.
When you describe data releasing as enabling more efficient competition, is there any danger that in that what you create then is an economy for scientists who are strongly incentivized to simply produce and release data rather than doing comprehensive analysis on it?
Well, I think that's up to the funding agencies to get the balance right in terms of creation and building on that. I mean, it's clear at the moment in our particular field, as we know, we're in a data collection phase. Yeah, I mean, but I think that's the funding agencies deciding what things they're going to finance as being most appropriate. But we know that there's very large amounts of data scattered, where some of it you can only get